How did a Dane from a socialist country end up designing for New York's 1%? Superstar architect Thomas Juul-Hansen knows firsthand.
When we worked at 157, it was 1,000 foot tall. The tallest residential condominium building in the Western Hemisphere.
Today, we're going inside the lower Manhattan home of a man who's helped shape the city's skyline. We'll take a stroll down the Highline, which of course he had a hand in. Then, we're moving on up to the east side to check out the views of Sutton Tower. The 847-foot tall, 63-story skyscraper was designed by our guest, and not without a dash of controversy.
I'm Jennifer Gould, and this is Gimme Shelter.
Hi, Thomas.
Welcome to 50 West.
Thank you. Thanks so much. Tell us a little bit about this place to start. You were saying it has 20-foot ceilings. We're downtown.
Of course, having 20-foot ceilings with floor-to-ceiling glass is very valuable for us. As people who are in the design world and sensitive to our environment, we're very conscious about natural light. Especially coming from Denmark, where the winter time you can go for a month without seeing anything but gray skies.
That's harsh.
It's very harsh, and having natural light, as we have here, we never turn on the lights. It really, I think, helps us as a family stay happy.
Now, you made your name with working for the first super tall tower in New York City, 157. Tell us, first of all, what is a super tall building?
When we worked at 157, it was 1,000 foot tall, which was at that point the tallest residential condominium building in the Western Hemisphere. I think what was interesting about it, right, is that this was the first high-end condominium building on 57th Street. That building became the DNA for what happened to all of 57th Street. This became now, certainly from a financial aspect, the most attractive real estate proposition in New York City.
And I know you're really big on natural pieces of material that you work with, like glass, stone, wood.
I tend to rely on natural materials a lot for sort of, let's say, the expression of the work, because natural materials don't date. The worst thing that can happen to someone like me is that my work dates and someone decides to remove it because it was dated. Because all the effort and all the money that went into that is now gone, right? So my number one objective in what I do is try to make something, and I'm not gonna be arrogant enough to say that I know how to do this, but my goal is to make something that is timeless. One of the criticisms that modern architecture has gotten a lot is that it's too cold. And I think, this is not a bad example that we're sitting in here. This apartment, to me, feels very warm, despite the fact that it's actually a big room with white walls, right?
And the plants and everything add to it, for sure.
Nature again, right?
With that, it was off to the Highline, the elevated linear park Thomas's creativity touched in more ways than one.
Thomas, you've designed 2 buildings on either side, along with some incredible architects who are also in this very small space. And behind us, we have the Standard Hotel, which I hear is one of your favorite buildings.
It certainly is, and it's certainly my favorite building by the Highline. What's interesting about the Standard is that it's a building that goes over the Highline. What's really cool about this building is that typically when you have buildings like this with fantastic views, it's all about being inside looking out. But in this case, they really situated the building in such a way that the Highline itself is where you can be a spectator for the building. And I think this building actually is a monument for the city without it being a look at me building, right? I think it's just a solid, really great piece of architecture.
I wanted to ask you, what brought you to New York in the first place, and then what keeps you here?
So I came to the realization that this is the only place in America where you can live without a car. And I've always been able to work in an environment where I could walk from home to work, which is an extraordinary luxury in my world. The reason I stayed in New York is that what I do, we really specialize in high-end residential design. It's very difficult to do everywhere else on the planet. Maybe it can happen in Hong Kong, maybe it can happen in London, but for me, New York and the energy...
Keeps you real?
Yeah, it keeps me grounded,
Next, we moved on up to the Upper East Side to get eyes on Sutton Tower, Thomas's latest tour de force.
So we're standing here outside Sutton Tower. That's that new 850-foot high building. And we're looking at something behind us that is very significant to the building.
Stone is something that for me has a lot of importance because stone carries a level of permanence. I like taking stone and massaging it and transforming it into something that all of a sudden is soft. And so the idea of taking stone and making it look like water, which is essentially what this piece is, I call this a drop. But it's, you know, the idea of taking a drop of water and the rings that come out of it. That's essentially what that is. And this idea of taking stone and manipulating it into shapes that may not be found in nature is something that carries up through the building.
So here we are on the 48th floor of Sutton Tower. It's a 63-story building. We are on the 48th floor, right in the middle. A beautiful 4-bedroom apartment. And Thomas, what I want to know is that there was a little bit of controversy getting this built. My understanding is that no one will ever be able to build something this tall in this neighborhood again.
We actually filed and got a building permit to build this tall. But once the neighborhood found out that we intended to build this tall, which was according to what the code allowed, they were up in arms and they tried to rewrite the code in such a way that they will shut us down. The neighborhood now only allows you to build, I think, 250 feet or something like this. So we can literally say that our views are protected because nobody can build this tall. But you can see, even on the middle of the building, we have extraordinary views here.
Stunning.
Yeah, it actually, you know, when you look out here, it feels like you're in the river, which is very unusual. This is the tallest building on the east side of Manhattan.
So this is a pretty incredible piece of stone. Is it one whole piece?
This is carved from one block of stone. Yeah, and it goes back, you know, to what I was saying earlier. You know, you put your hand on this, you kind of turn into a stone pervert very quickly. Actually, every apartment in the building, even the 1-bedrooms down on the lower floors, have this carved vanity.
That's very cool.
Everything is built to the same level of quality, which I think is a great achievement, quite honestly, on the developer's side.
So Thomas, when we look back on this time period, what are we going to think about these buildings?
Well, I think, you know, the concept of super tall is changing radically. We are in the middle of transforming the skyline of New York, right? And, you know, this for me is one of the things that's fantastic about living in New York, that it is not a static city at all. Yeah. It is always changing. And if you're going to be one of these NIMBY people who don't want to see change, where everything should be the same as it was in 1954, New York is probably not a great place for you to be. The truth of the matter is that it is a convenience, and the views we get up here is quite extraordinary. You know, you can really see the city when you're in this building, which, you know, for those of us who live on lower floors, it's a whole different experience. So I think it's fantastic. I love change.